Local news. Sometimes it's hard to identify. Sometimes you know what it is right when you see it. But how is news gathered, crafted, and delivered? When a local TV station puts together a story that lasts a couple minutes, there is a process, but sometimes that process is more interesting than the story itself. We're going to tell you the behind-the-scenes little nuggets that don't make it to TV. We are bringing you the people on the front lines in the action in a different light. This is Jay Wallace. Welcome to KVUE Off the Airwaves. Hurricane Harvey. The impact it made on Texas is far more than any one person can describe. It was devastating, heartbreaking, and it was severe weather like Texas hadn't seen in quite some time. Here in Austin, we didn't get it as bad as many other places, but the hurricane still impacted this city and especially people in our eastern viewing area. So now, a year later, we take the opportunity to sit down with members of the KVUE storm team, Chief Meteorologist Albert Ramon, and meteorologists Erika, Lopez, and Nathan Gogo, to reflect on what they personally went through during the moments leading up to and during the storm.
You're looking live from Corpus Christi, Texas, as Hurricane Harvey, a Category 4 hurricane, making landfall right now.
Wind speeds sustained at 80 miles an hour.
Live here in Corpus Christi, we are still seeing very intense wind and rain.
This is going to be a very dangerous situation. This is where the worst of the hurricane is right now. Right here, Rockport, Fulton, here in Aransas County. The eye is about to move over Rockport here within the next 10 to 15 minutes as it continues to trek off towards the northwest inlet.
Well, we have the team here. Thank you guys for coming in today. Just so everyone can know which voice is attached to who they see on air, since we got a lot of voices here, if you guys could all just say who you are and what you do at KVUE.
My name's meteorologist Erika Lopez, and I'm the morning meteorologist.
Wait, your name's meteorologist?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
I was going to say Nathan Gogo, but I didn't think it'd be that funny. It was only funny in my head. But
This is Albert, Chief Meteorologist here at KVUE.
And this is Nathan Gogo.
Why did y'all decide to become meteorologists?
So I went to college studying meteorology, and I didn't necessarily want to be a TV meteorologist in the beginning, but I had a couple internships, one in particular with Amy Freeze at Fox Chicago News, and she kind of really inspired me to become a TV meteorologist. I really enjoyed my internship with her, and then in college or through college, we had this fun little TV show that we kind of were able to, you know, get accustomed to being in front of the green screen and talking about weather. And so by the time I graduated, I thought, maybe I should do this.
me, kind of two reasons, I guess. For some reason, the news, I was always fascinated by watching the news, the production of the news. I always wanted to know, why do they toss the reporters like this? Or, you know, just notice different things. And that was probably elementary age. I enjoyed watching the news more than cartoons.
Wow.
And then I always enjoyed the meteorologists a little more. I always thought they were a little bit more special.
Cooler.
Yeah, because they got to be as nerdy as they can or want, right? And then when something big was happening, everyone was tuning in and they just get to geek out. And then, so I grew up in Arizona, watching the meteorologist there, and Arizona, the joke is, hard to talk about how hot it is, right? It's just sunny and hot. But there is that one season, monsoon season, that's actually busy, and we get some good storms. It's when dust storms roll around, or as now the popular term, haboob. That's right. So when those roll in, and so I also had a lot of meteorological questions, and then I would joke around in high school that I was going to be the weather girl in my earth-based science class, and it was just a funny thing, I guess, that I would tell myself, mainly because I didn't believe in myself that I actually could, A, study the weather because I was horrible at math, and B, like be an on-air talent. But then college came around and I was like, well, I guess I don't know what else to study. So I just kind of kept going, and then everything just kept falling into place.
Right.
It's funny, I think if you talk to most meteorologists, the passion started elementary school, right? We always had at least some kind of a kernel of interest. And mine goes back to second grade. 1992, Hurricane Andrew had just hit South Florida and was out in the Gulf of Mexico, about to make its way towards the central Gulf Coast. And I got super just hyped up about it. And that's how it kind of all started. And like Erika, in high school, people knew that I liked meteorology, and I was a weather watcher for the local NBC station in Corpus Christi. And then went on an intern at that same station, and then became a direct competitor of that station with my first job at the CBS affiliate in Corpus Christi. And then in October of 2009, ended up here at KVUE.
So what is it about Texas compared to other states, other areas? Why is Texas weather weird, difficult, peculiar to cover?
Well, because we have everything.
Yeah.
You know, from winter weather, you can get ice storms and snow. You get tropical weather, obviously, with Harvey, like last year. You get epic flash flooding. That is our main concern here in Central Texas, is because of the topography. It doesn't take a whole lot of rainfall to cause big time issues here where we live. So it is a weather person's paradise, because you get it all: tornadoes, hurricanes, winter weather, flooding, you name it. We get it here in Texas.
By winter weather, we mean like a 1/10 of an inch of ice, just so we're clear.
Right.
And people that don't know how to drive in it.
Yeah, exactly. Now, before we get into specifics of Hurricane Harvey and whatnot, let me get a feel for the team. What is fun, interesting? How do you guys like working together?
I can't stand it.
No, can't stand it.
No, I mean, I think we all get along really well. We all are a little different, but in our own respects. But I think we mesh well, and we try to work as a team. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to work as a team for it to work out well and to enjoy your job. Because if you don't, you know, it's just not fun to work with people you don't get along with.
Yeah, I would say we all kind of fill in. We complement each other very well, because we all fill in the gaps, you know. And so as a whole, we just make up an awesome team. But we all work equally as hard, you know. Yeah, we all bring. Why are you making that face, Albert? Oh, he rolled his eyes with Nathan Gogo behind him.
No, obviously we have a great friendship on and off air. You know, we have kind of the same sense of humor and stuff, and we're all, you know, young. So I think we mesh really well with each other.
Y'all were all here when Harvey came, when Harvey happened. Give me a little play-by-play. Go back before Harvey hit. When did you know it was going to be bad? What were those moments like when you were realizing what could be coming to Texas?
So, fun fact about that week, Harvey made landfall on a Friday. That Monday, anybody know what happened that Monday? The whole country was talking about it. Solar eclipse.
That's
so,
right.
Forgot
you know,
about
we started
that.
off with a solar eclipse. It was a total solar eclipse for parts of the United States, and everybody was talking about it. That was the major national headline.
Yeah.
You know, ABC was wall to wall for hours on KVUE, and by the end of that work week, the national story was this natural disaster that was occurring in the state of Texas with a Category 4 Harvey, the strongest hurricane to hit Texas since 1961, Carla. So it gives you an idea that for really the first half of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we were monitoring something coming out of the Caribbean Sea, going to the Gulf of Mexico. And by Wednesday afternoon, we were planning on sending myself to the coast, because we were only expecting at that time a tropical storm, maybe a minimal hurricane to hit the Texas coast. So from Wednesday afternoon till Friday at 10 o'clock, we went from a minor situation, maybe some rain, some wind along the coast, to one of the worst natural disasters in the state's history, with that Category 4 making landfall in Aransas County along the middle Texas coast that Friday night.
Chief Meteorologist Albert Ramon here. Category 4 major Hurricane Harvey, which within the hour looks to make landfall somewhere around Rockport, Fulton. Those outer bands beginning to move into our southeastern viewing area, Fayette County, Bastrop County. So this is just the beginning of a very long duration, very wet, and potentially dangerous weather impacts to our own area.
I have to go back in the text messages, because I remember going into work Saturday. I worked that weekend, the weekend before Harvey hit. Saturday, nothing was on the models. Nothing was going on. We had no indication anything was going to happen tropical. Sunday, I come in, and all of a sudden it was like a switch. I remember texting you, Albert, being like, "Oh my goodness, look how much rain." At that point, it was just rain. But it was predicting, I remember, a lot of rain, and I texted you a picture, and I'm like, wow, this is a big difference from the day before. And then each day after that, little by little, you know, something was coming together. And as you mentioned, Wednesday through Friday is when things really ramped up, where, I mean, by Friday, 24 hours, it went from like a tropical storm to a category 3 or 4 within, what, 12 or 24 hours? I mean, incredible.
Yeah, incredible amount of rapid intensification, something I've never seen before in my career.
Yeah, and I would say right after we sent Nathan, probably less than 12 hours after that, we realized, holy crap, we shouldn't have sent him because it's going to be this bad. Yeah. And now me and Albert are stuck here at the station by ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, we're already at a 3 meteorologist team.
That's right. Y'all had 3 at that time. Now, clarify this. Why is it important to have all hands on deck? Like, what is actually happening? Why is that idea of all hands on deck necessary?
Well, because we're a 24/7 weather team, and especially when you're dealing with a natural disaster, we need to provide that information 24/7. And a 4-person weather team is hard to do that alone. And then you take 1 out of the mix. Actually, we took 2 out of the mix.
Right.
It became a huge challenge. So we learned a lot about staffing and how we can handle natural disasters from Harvey.
Okay.
Our new policy is if there's even a teeny tiny chance that we may have major weather here in our KVUE viewing area, which is 13 counties here in Central Texas, we keep everyone home base.
Okay.
It was great to have Nathan along the coast, but we have a huge room, newsroom staff that can in the future go and do that.
Right.
So as you can see, we kind of came out of our little area where we were a little bit more protected. But yeah, we're going to be out here doing full team coverage. We'll have an update at 10 o'clock. Jason and I will have an update coming up at 10 o'clock. Make sure you join us. And we'll have full updates through the weekend about Hurricane Harvey as it continues to make landfall as we speak on the Texas coast and as it starts to impact Central Texas as well.
Well, let's walk through that Harvey timeline. We'll get into some of the questions about what happened in coverage, but let's just talk about what happened on each day during that whole time period. When did what hit which part of Texas? So
Harvey made landfall as a Category 4 hurricane Friday night at 10 o'clock, right when we started our 10 o'clock news.
10 o'clock news, yeah.
Aransas County, which is the Rockport area. So it slowly moved inland, hit Rockport, a lot of damage, including storm surge in Port Aransas, and then continuing to move inland, Refugio and Goliad County into the early morning hours. For us here in Central Texas, there wasn't a whole lot going on the radar Friday night. Our rainfall really started to ramp up Saturday afternoon, Saturday night. And it was Saturday night, the first time in my career that I was actually scared on air because I wasn't sure what was going to happen. We've been looking at these forecast projections of 20 plus inches of rainfall in our eastern counties, and they were materializing in just a matter of hours in Bastrop and Lee and Fayette County, and that was Saturday night. And that rain continued into Sunday. And it was in that time frame that Houston started to deal with their major flooding.
Yep.
And then that major flooding then pivoted late that weekend into the Beaumont-Port Arthur area. So Harvey's going to go down as a 3-time natural disaster, right? First was landfall Friday night, Category 4 hurricane. You had wind gusts, over 130 miles per hour. You had just a super amount of rainfall in the Houston and Beaumont area. That was natural disaster number 2. And the number 3 that impacted our viewing area was the flooding, and in some cases historic flooding along the Colorado River because of the amount of rainfall that we had right along the Colorado River Basin east of Austin.
Erika and Nathan, talk to me about what was y'all's part as this was all going on. What were you doing to help with the coverage?
Again, in the beginning, it was just Albert and I in the station. So we're on air at this point nonstop 24/7 with the anchors. Obviously, it's a meteorological event, so we're on air a lot. So basically, me and Albert are splitting. I wouldn't even say 12-hour shifts, 16-hour shifts. Albert decided to actually sleep here because he lives in Pflugerville, so it's a bit of a drive. I just lived about 8 minutes from the station at that moment, so I could at least go home and sleep a bit. So you're going home to get 6-7 hours of sleep if you can, because you need to unwind, you need to kind of just settle down, get your brain to shut off for a second, and then just book it back to the station. But yeah, I would just say just nonstop on-air coverage. I mean, at that moment, we're in an interesting spot because Harvey at this moment is impacting those along the coast, right? Yep. So we have evacuations from Corpus Christi. At this point, not a lot of people are evacuating from Houston. But they are being warned, you know, hey, give them a heads up if it wasn't a mandatory evacuation yet. But folks all across from Corpus all the way to Houston are starting to evacuate. Even San Antonio is starting to be on edge. So I felt like we're in the perfect bullseye for all of these people to start evacuating into our area. So I knew a lot of eyes were going to be on our viewing area, checking in on their loved ones. So it was just constant, not only monitoring meteorologically what is going on, but in communication with everyone that we possibly can, just because of the specific location that we were in. I mean, you're either going into Austin to evacuate where you're leaving from the coast, or if not, you're driving to Dallas, but Dallas is another 3 hours away or so. So so I was just in the studio, just constant weather updates. We also had a meteorologist come in.
Craig Moeller from our Tegna station.
That's right.
He was a lifesaver. Oh my gosh, he was awesome.
Yeah, when we started figuring out that this was going to be a 24/7 kind of event that could go on a few days, that's when we asked for some reinforcements. Meanwhile, I think maybe the most exciting story out of the three of us was Nathan. Nathan was ground zero, and Nathan and I had talked. I think that Thursday night you were in Port Lavaca, and we were talking about the storm surge forecast, and we started talking about maybe you shouldn't be at that location at landfall.
Yeah, so when we went first down there, we first went to Corpus Christi, which is kind of where all the headquarters were at our sister station, Channel 3 KVUE. So I was sent out to Port Lavaca, which, if you're not familiar, is right north of Rockport. And at the time, I remember Port Lavaca was kind of in the bullseye. It was right before, you know, the system, Harvey, kind of shifted a little south, but in that moment, we were thinking Port Lavaca was going to be ground zero. And we're being right on the bay, we were concerned. We had a satellite truck with us and, you know, just a low-lying area. And so, you know, as the system continued to push closer to us, I was in a hotel room with all types of other media, you know, you name it, ABC, you know, NBC, Weather Channel. We were all in the same hotel. And me never experiencing something like this, I couldn't go to sleep. I couldn't eat. I was so anxious because as the system's approaching, it just keeps getting stronger and stronger. I didn't want to go to sleep and then wake up and be the only one in the hotel, you know. So it was hard to really get your eyes off of radar and looking at it. So yeah, I remember calling Albert, getting his recommendation, thinking, you know what, maybe we shouldn't be here because not only for our safety, but for our equipment. Our equipment, you know, would have totally been destroyed. A satellite truck, I mean, how much money is that? A lot. So we felt responsible for that. I was with my photographer, Dennis. So we actually booked it last minute down to Corpus Christi to get out of the harm's way before it moved on to shore. But it was an incredible experience. I mean, eye-opening and the highlight of my career for sure. I mean, I was down there for maybe 3-4 days. It's hard to really fathom because, you know, you see it happen, but then like just life just stops basically. You know, the hurricane comes on shore and you can't go to the grocery store, you can't get gas. I mean, you can't do anything. You can't use electricity in many instances. So, I mean, it was incredible. We went over to Rockport the morning after it hit, and every single building I saw was at least had some damage. I mean, there was not one building that was saved from Hurricane Harvey. And because the system moved on so slowly, it was pouring rain for days after. So there wasn't really much to clean up. There wasn't, you know, you really had to be on alert for days after.
Along the Texas coast, Port Lavaca, we have been staying since yesterday. We got here in the afternoon. And things have really kind of started to go downhill from when we got here yesterday. Mandatory evacuations here in Calhoun County. We're looking at anywhere from 100 to 120 mile per hour winds. Those are sustained. We could have gusts that are higher. And the biggest concern continues to be storm surge. Storm surge that, you know, could exceed perhaps 8 to 12 feet.
I want to go back to something Erika brought up. The idea of evacuation. Why do we always have so much trouble getting people to evacuate when they really need to?
Yeah, well, my first market was in the Victoria area, so I actually know I have a lot of close friends and loved ones there, and I could definitely say that you're just so attached to your life. You're attached to your belongings. You're not only thinking about your personal life, you're confident in yourself. So you're like, I can ride this out. I've been through this storm. I've been through that storm. We have a generator. We're good. But then the aftermath, I mean, we know there's a lot of crime that happens after storms, and you want to protect your belongings. You don't want to think about leaving your home and then having to return, and your home is fine from the storm, but someone broke in and stole a lot of your possessions. So I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, in my opinion.
I grew up in the Corpus Christi area. We used to go to Rockport and Port A, all the time. I was only about 40 miles away from my hometown in Beeville. I worked in Corpus Christi. That was my first market, and in my 4.5 years there were a lot of close calls. Rita and
almost happened.
Almost happened. And keep in mind, the Middle Texas coast, this coastal bend of Texas, as we call it, hadn't had a major hurricane since 1970. That was Celia. So you had 2, 3, even 4 generations now that had never gone through a major hurricane. They've gone through some weak tropical storms. There was Claudette in 2003. But I think that's the real reason, too, especially in this part of the state of Texas that hasn't gone through a natural disaster like Harvey in decades. The strongest one since Carla in 1961, and this was even stronger than that. So that's another reason. And I think Erika's absolutely right. Put yourself in that same situation. It's hard to leave home. I was thinking about that with all the wildfires that have been going on in California.
Sure.
How can you leave your house? You want to be there to protect it. You want to be there protected from not just the natural disaster any way you can, but also, as Erika said, from looters as well.
Right. But you have to keep in mind, I always think, leaving just for your safety from the storm itself is important, I think, but also even if, you do survive and you're at your house and, you're fine, you have to keep in mind, electricity could be out for weeks. You have the aftermath. You can't go anywhere. I barely escaped the coast days after the storm because my car was running out of gas, and every gas station I would go to was out of gas. I barely made it to San Antonio. I was almost stranded. Thankfully, the third gas station I got to, which was in rural, Alice, I think, had a little bit of gas left, and I was able to make it to San Antonio. And at that point, gas stations had gas, but you have to keep in mind, not only do you deal with the storm, but you have the aftermath of where are you going to get, do you have, food to provide for your family for a week because no grocery stores are open, no food, nothing's open. So I remember the first meal I had after 3 days of eating goldfish. It was the greatest thing in my life.
Right.
I had a bratwurst, and it was tasted better than I've ever had.
Now with flooding, what is the one or the handful of things, what makes it so dangerous, just in general? It could anywhere in the country. When flooding happens, why is it so dangerous for people's lives?
Well, freshwater flash flooding is the #1 weather killer. It's not lightning. It's not tornadoes. It's not storm surge. It's freshwater flash flooding, rainfall adding up in a short period of time and causing death. And we live in an area that's called Flash Flood Alley because of where we live. It doesn't take a whole lot for you to hit solid rock because of where we live in proximity to the hill country. So we've had numerous flash flood disasters that go on, in the record books. There's one that happened in September of 1921 that was a worst case scenario for our area, and it was a stalled out tropical system, something like Harvey, and added up to over 30 inches of rainfall in the Thorndale area, so Williamson County into Milam County. Over 20 inches fell in just 12 hours and caused a lot of destruction and death. And that's our worst case scenario for us here in Central Texas, is a stalled out tropical system. And that's why we were so frightened on what was going to happen with Harvey. There was a lack of steering currents in the atmosphere. There was nothing that was going to take Harvey to the north or to the west or wherever. It was just sitting over parts of South Central Texas and caused this devastating flooding, especially in Southeast Texas, but along the Colorado River. So both river flooding and freshwater flash flooding are two main concerns here in Central Texas, and something that we had to deal with during Harvey.
Well, and I think, I could be wrong on this, but I think 85% of the people who die from flooding die from driving into flooded waters.
Yeah.
That's by far the most, because I've been in a situation before, and even as in college, it is so hard to see how deep water is, and you think you can make it, or you see other cars making it, and it's hard to turn around. You're just lost. You're under pressure.
And that's why we talk about it a lot
nerve-wracking.
on air. Even me, when I'm out in the
Yeah.
field, and we are all reminding people, turn around, don't drown, right? We've said it 100 times, but there's a reason because of what that stat you
Right.
just gave.
So, you know, I mean, sometimes we see video of people clearly driving into what looks to be 10 feet of water. They just, you know, to people, they just don't expect it. You know, people don't watch maybe coverage as much as we do, obviously, because we're in it.
Right.
So, you know, I think of my parents, they're probably not nearly as educated in terms of what's going on. So they might be running to the grocery store not realizing, hey, we just picked up 10 inches of rainfall. And then they just don't expect to have, you know, a viaduct or like a low crossing area filled up with water. And all of a sudden you're stuck and you're like, should I get out of my car? And, you know, you have to make split-second decisions, and it's really scary.
Yeah, I would say a lot of it, and I mean the people who are driving, they probably just weren't fully prepared. They're probably driving to try to escape the situation that they're in, but they weren't. I mean, flooding is a situation where, yes, we can forecast it, but it can also get out of hand much more rapidly than what was anticipated. So you're stuck in a situation that you weren't prepared for, and then you're trying to get out. And getting out, sometimes it's much more dangerous, and they're just trying to do what they can at that moment. Not only that, but also debris in the water is a lot of things that people don't talk about, especially, you know, electricity. There's a lot. I mean, this water, especially when we're talking about coastal areas, it's so dirty you can't see what's in it. There's wild animals. There's alligators, and you know, when we're talking about Houston, there's
we've seen videos of that. Of alligators.
People get punctured by slabs of wood that are in the water. So that's something that people don't talk about a lot. Also, the debris that's in the water.
Good morning. It is about 3:34 a.m. on Saturday. Here's what's going on. The latest, if you're tuning in on Hurricane Harvey, now a Category 2 hurricane. This is a huge national story. Is all across the coast right now in Texas. Folks in Austin want to know what's going to happen in Austin and what's going on. Fast forward to getting closer to landfall. We're expecting this storm to possibly be a Category 3 hurricane as it approaches the coast, and then likely holding on strong until it quickly dies down.
Now, I know this is something you guys probably hear 10 times more than me, but it's debated among meteorologists, among news reporters, just among people on social media, why someone needs to be out there, why Nathan was out there, why you see the reporter, you know, out in the hurricane. And I think this is the perfect time to talk about it. Talk to me about where that line is. When is it worth it to send that person, the meteorologist, the reporter, out there? And when is it like, you know what? They're not safe. They're not safe on air, because you've seen the comments. I've seen the comments on social media where they'll say, why is that reporter out there? Why is that person out there? So what's the purpose of that? And where is the line?
Well, our main goal is to get the best pictures, right, and the best sound and the best live images. But what tops all of that at the end of the day is our staff's safety. And that's why there was that decision made of taking Nathan away from ground zero into a safer spot, away from storm surge, away from the worst of the wind. So our staff safety here at KVUE and our company Tegna is our #1 priority.
Right.
Did we have the best live pictures that day? We didn't, because again, safety is #1. It is important for us to be there, though, because especially where we live in Austin, a lot of folks from along the Texas coast evacuated to Austin. So they're in hotels and they're curious. They want to know what's happening to my neighborhood.
What does home look like?
Exactly. What's my house condition? What's my neighborhood? What's my town look like? So that's important for us to be there, not only during, but especially after, to make sure people know across the state what's happening.
And I would argue that the best reason to be there isn't for during the storm, it is for after. You know, a lot of times it's hard to get there after it's happened. So if you already have a crew in the area, you know, the reason why we've had so much help in terms of Hurricane Harvey is the images. If people aren't seeing what's happening, they're not going to be as inclined to help. And so the whole idea is to give help for people in need. That's the reason why we're doing it. And if you don't have any images coming out, family suffering or just the damage itself, it's hard to be inclined to donate your money or donate your time to help if you're not seeing it.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely strictly for educational purposes. I know sometimes it looks worse than it actually is. And sometimes people do put themselves in crazy situations, and it's difficult nowadays with media. I mean, there's so much competition for the best picture and whatnot. But I think when you're talking about meteorologists, our purpose at heart is for educational purposes. It's not just for, the competition or try to compete and whatnot. I would say that's our best intention for sure.
Nathan, just since you were out there on the front line, when were you the most scared?
It was definitely when I was in Port Lavaca. I just didn't know what to expect. I had never been through a tropical storm really before. I mean, kind of. I mean, in Austin and when I worked in Waco, we've had a couple little tropical systems. But yeah, I just didn't know what to expect. And the day as it was coming onto land, Port Lavaca, where I was, looked to be at the time the area that was going to be hit the hardest, kind of on the right side of the storm. So it was just a lot of not knowing what to expect, time running out, figuring out what we're going to do. Should I leave? Should I stay? And I remember trying to speak to actually all the other meteorologists there, just who had been through, because I mean, there was people there who had, Mike Seidel, for example, who's like, he works for the Weather Channel, and he's been through hundreds of hurricanes. And, I try to get some of their feedback, and one of
Guidance.
our meteorologists from sister station in Ken's, Paul, yeah, he was there, and he really comforted me too. So I think that was when I was most nervous. I just didn't know what to expect, and yeah.
So we're 1 year removed from Harvey. Try to look 10 years, 20 years down the line. What's going to be the one thing you remember about this experience?
Well, for me, it's how to handle a tropical situation like Harvey.
Yeah.
I went back about 6 months after Harvey, about 6 months ago, and I was a little disappointed in myself, to be honest, on how I handled some of the situations, both on and off air. So it was a great learning experience for me going forward on how to handle this, both on TV, but also as kind of the little supervisor of this department.
I would say, this will always be one of the highlights of my career. I know being on the coast was obviously not probably the best decision in terms of staffing. We definitely could have had me here and helped out, but I mean, it was an incredibly eye-opening experience to be there and to see something like that. And for me, it really solidified my passion for weather, and not only that, but just gave me so much respect for how powerful Mother Nature is.
So for me, I remember the feeling. Sometimes we get in a little bit of a slump during the dog days of summer, We're talking about heat, triple-digit temperatures. You have to find ways to make the forecast exciting, different.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then you sometimes wonder, am I even making a difference? Are people really listening? And then, we're finishing the end of summer well into the hurricane season, and then Harvey just, all of a sudden, hell breaks loose in Austin and the coastal areas. And then I would say I specifically, this moment I'll never forget. So specifically when all the flooding was happening I'm just laughing because I know you're going to totally put this in. When the flooding started happening in Smithville and, Fayette County and all our eastern counties, and our reporters are out there, we're getting all these images, but I literally have Facebook viewers who are messaging me on Facebook and asking for help, telling me I have water right now to my shoulders. What do I do? Who do I contact? And it's just a crazy feeling thinking this person is in a life or death situation and they're messaging me on Facebook right now because they need help, And so I've just never experienced something like that before, and it really just impacted you because you are definitely making a difference and people are listening, and so
yeah.
Geez Louise.
No, I didn't know have any idea that happened, but
I think you were sleeping
in the weather office. But I mean, that's what it's all about. We got the fancy computer graphics and the Doppler radar, but at the end of the day, that's what it's all about for us as meteorologists, is to be there during great times of need. It's not just it's going to be sunny and 99 today. It's during those days like Harvey where people come to us for that information. So it's a very, very big responsibility, and we got to take it super seriously. And that's why it is a pleasure to serve our community.
Tonight, the crisis is far from over in neighborhoods hit hard by Harvey.
It has been 1 week since Hurricane Harvey first made landfall near Corpus Christi, and cleanup is still underway throughout South Texas. And we're just continuing to hear stories from this community of how neighbors are pulling together to help each other during these hard times.
And all day we've been telling you about the organizations in our community helping victims of Hurricane Harvey rebuild their lives.
And as flooding has subsided throughout Bastrop County, the focus now is on long-term recovery.
I will say, I think because we were so aggressive on air, and it goes to our colleagues across the street as well at the other TV stations. We were so aggressive on stay off the roads because there was a lot of unknowns. We have a Category 4 hurricane that just made landfall. It's now stalling out. We've got computer models that are spitting out now 20, 30 plus inches of rainfall. There was a big unknown what that amount of rainfall can do in our own viewing area. And I think because we were so aggressive telling people the big unknown, how dangerous this situation was, a lot of people either went to a safe place or stayed home and off the roads, and we didn't lose one person in our viewing area. There was a lot of death and destruction in Houston, of course, but in our own viewing area where we also had major flooding, especially along the Colorado River, we didn't lose one person. And a couple of days after everything settled down, I sent a note to my competition, to Scott at Fox and to Jim at NBC and Chicago at CBS and to Burton at Spectrum. And I said, congratulations to you and your staff. We as a community, a meteorology community, I think we saved lives over the last few days. Now let's go get a beer. And Jim Spencer's paying. That's what I wrote in my email.
Did you end up doing that?
No, we never did that, but we need to. We need to. Yeah.
Including hurricane coverage, including flooding coverage. Everything y'all do, connecting with people. Why is local weather coverage, why is it something we need? Having you guys here at KVUE stay in touch with people about what's going on through Facebook, through Twitter, on air, everything we've discussed. Why is this something in society? Why is it important that we have local weather coverage?
Well, I think if you don't have local coverage, you don't have people talking about things that you can relate to. So in our local area, we are a part of that community, so we can we can talk about things that people can identify with, and we understand our community a lot more than any national person would. So if you take local weather out of everything, I mean, I can't imagine a society where that would be the case. You would have, I don't know, like it would be hard to even fathom that to me.
So the place I worked at before this, we did national weather. And I would say it's just physically impossible to really cover everything that's going on specifically in the country for every single person. And it's just way too big of an area. I mean, you can focus on a general a severe thunderstorm watch or whatnot. But then if an actual storm, especially when we're talking about tornado coverage, it happens within minutes, a severe or a tornado warning or an actual tornado touching the ground, So it's just physically impossible. If we want to keep our viewers and people across the country the safest as possible, I think having specific, people dedicated to specific areas, it's definitely necessary.
I think there are a lot of critics that will say that local news is dying, that we're in a dying industry.
Right.
But it's situations like Harvey and even like the Austin bombing that tell you 100% why local news and having journalists and your local meteorologist is so important. It's just like the Austin bombing, just like what we saw with Harvey, with our station KHOU and the other affiliates across the state of Texas. You can't cover this from a national standpoint. You can't be in New York or LA and cover the impacts that are happening in communities like Manor and Pflugerville and Hutto and LaGrange. You've got to have your local stations, your local reporters and meteorologists be able to cover it. And as a meteorologist, it's super important because we're able to say, hey, if you're in southern areas of Fayette County, as you get a little bit closer to the county line where there's this little grocery store, we're able to relate to people because we know that area. We've been in that area, and we can tell people, watch out for this low spot or whatever. So that's why it's super important.
Well, Erika, Albert, Nathan, thank you for your transparency, honesty, wisdom, knowledge. I think it's important to, just from my perspective, not forget what happened too, that we can, this is an outlet through the podcast. We can talk about what happened and just remember how we covered it and what people went through. And I think this was really valuable, really good. I'm glad you guys were all able to make it in.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, if you like what you heard on KVUE Off the Airwaves, check out our daily newscasts. Daybreak from 4:30 to 7, midday at 11, KVUE News at 5 and 6, the night beat at 10, and anytime on KVUE.com.